with
Thank you very
SafeStack
much.
version 2.
Lovely. Okay, good. So yes, thanks again for inviting me. I think I've got, what, is it 15 minutes or 30 minutes? Or just get through it as quickly as possible?
We will see, but there were some cancellations, so we should be good. But I need to talk to Mikkel, but go for it.
Okay, so this is, yeah, I'm not going to give, it's not going to be a code demo with flashy lights and stuff. I just wanted to give everyone an update on where we are with SafeStack, what we're thinking about in terms of V2, what our plans are, and really what the kind of next steps are, and if you're interested in helping, how you can potentially contribute as well. Yeah, this is really just about the road ahead and refocusing on what is safe, really. When it started, I just thought it's worth refreshing everyone on how Safe started, which was, you know, Fable was coming around, and then we had things like Giraffe and Suave and things like this. And there were no really coherent stories about how to get started with these different technologies. And that was really about the original message of Safe. Now, in the previous talk, Dom was talking about simplicity. And that's actually something that we've realized, and I've definitely learned from working with SafeStack over the last year or two, particularly training up new customers on Safe. And when we started looking at Safe, we had a tagline, which is "What is Safe?" and it was a long sort of three sentences, and so on and so forth. And really, what I think what we're trying to do with Safe 2 now is to really compress that message. So one of the things is, what's the vision of Safe? We just want it to be the best way to write functional first web applications. Simple as that. So not necessarily about on F# or on .NET. We just want it to make it the best way. If you want to do functional first web apps, SafeStack is where we think you should be. So just to sort of recap as to why you might be wanting to do SafeStack, and again, this is a kind of message that we've tried to simplify, but it's really down into 4 kind of parts. So one is that it's super productive. Whether you're someone who's coming from an F# background that maybe is not web savvy, so I would include myself in that background probably a couple of years ago, where I'd done sort of web forms and a bit of ASP.NET MVC, but I certainly wasn't a JavaScript guru, then Safe was a gateway for me to really be productive end to end. The second part is it's fun. We see that not just ourselves, but with some of our customers as well, and people that are using Safe, that it generally seems to be an enjoyable story. People are happy using Safe. They are generally delighted at how they can be productive in a way that potentially they couldn't have been before. Next thing is it's flexible. So we're very keen to ensure that Safe isn't a walled garden. It's opinionated in what we start with, but it's not going to lock you into any specific libraries or technologies. We provide you with a starting point, and you can then change from there and amend it as you see fit. And lastly, we want it to be a safe choice. Now, that's not a pun there. It's not intentional. That's not the design. The point I'm making here is we're running on top of platforms that have millions and millions of users, whether that's on top of the JavaScript ecosystem, whether it's running on React, on .NET Core, and on ASP.NET. So we don't want people to think that using Safe means that it's going to be a risk in the sense of the runtimes and the libraries that they're sitting on top of. So just to refresh, what is really the core parts of SafeStack? So first we have this thing called Saturn, which is functional first wrapper on top of ASP.NET. Don touched on Giraffe before, so Saturn is just really a batteries included version of Giraffe that just pushes it a bit further. Then we have Azure, which is our sort of starting point for our hosting and service platform. Excuse me. Then we have Fable, which is where we see F# for the browser. And finally, we recommend Elmish, which is like UI programming for the web. Again, if you've been following any of the things on Build recently, you'll see that Microsoft are trying to get involved in this kind of MVU pattern, which is definitely something that Elmish has a very nice implementation of. So just a quick look back at where SafeStack was and what it's achieved so far. So just looking at the current state of SAFE, some of the things we have definitely achieved is I think we've really lowered the barrier to entry for F# web applications now. Again, SAFE hasn't invented any of these techs, Fable, Giraffe, ASP.NET, Elmish. These are all things that people have done already. I think all we've done is provide a place that people can focus around and where they can look to get some guidance, where we can get them up and running as quickly as possible. And it's kind of just a brand more than anything. Certainly within the F# community, it's gained some acceptance and people seem to be gravitating towards it. We're seeing certainly a lot more people understanding what it can do. And also outside of the F# world, this has definitely started to get awareness. So whether that's on the Tech Radar from ThoughtWorks, where it was featured on last year, but also as a way for maybe not non-F# devs. I'm talking people that aren't even in the .NET platform potentially, that are coming to SafeStack and therefore coming into the F# world. So these are people that we're working with in the past that are coming from places like PHP, potentially, or JavaScript or Python, that are coming into F# almost via the SafeStack. So that's certainly something that I think has been a good success. And we've also, I think, helped provide a place where people can evolve some tools and libraries. So whether that's things like some of the work that Zaid's done with things like Fable remoting, which is definitely in the safe sort of space of bringing together client and server, but also things like that have been working alongside Saturn and Giraffe. So you've seen libraries popping up around that, things like WebSockets, things like that as well, Fable Reactive, all those sorts of libraries that are really helping the end-to-end thing. And I think SAFE is providing a nice sort of middle ground where everyone can sort of work towards it and look at it as a central repository almost. There are definitely some places, though, that we can improve, which is what we're looking at with SAFE v2. So things like it's sometimes difficult for newcomers to see at a glance what SAFE is at a code level. Particularly when you create a brand new template, it can be quite difficult to see the wood from the trees because there's a lot of really good stuff in there, but it can be overwhelming. That also impacts on the maintainers, people like Thomas and myself and a few others, in that the template is actually really difficult. So we want to make that a bit easier for us to maintain so that we can evolve it more rapidly. The documentation we need to improve. There's some good stuff there, but we see a lot of questions about how do I do things, and a few other things that I'll touch on in a bit that we know we need to improve. We need more wrappers for third-party libraries, so it's easier for people to start using JavaScript components and React components that everyone needs. And the development on the template was a bit stop and starty. There's a good reason for that, because when we started looking at SAFE v2, we were going down a different, a different route, and we kind of pivoted a couple of months ago and really changed that. So that's part of the reason why SAFE, in terms of the template and a lot of the documentation, has been kind of quiet for the last few months. So given that, let's talk a little bit about what SafeStack v2 is going to bring. And we're relatively close to at least getting the core parts of this out, hopefully in the next week or two, I would think. So as I said, the first thing we want to do is make it easier for newcomers to really get what SAFE is. And I don't just mean by reading a blog post. I mean actually spinning up a new SAFE template and being able to see at a glance what it's about. We want to make it cheaper to maintain the template. We want to take full advantage of improvements in .NET Core. And this is kind of related to the previous point in that the more expensive the template is to maintain, the harder it becomes for us to move to a new version of .NET Core, because we have to test against all the different combinations that we have. Also shift focus from tooling in the template to looking at making excellent libraries and documentation. So what this means is we're going to be removing things from the template, but instead of that, look to making libraries that are ideally self-documenting. And if they're more than that, provide very good documentation on the SAFE site that can either redirect people to more detailed documentation elsewhere and provide simple getting started instructions. So this could be something like, how do I add Fulma support? How do I add Feliz support, or things like that that are simple documentation that people can get up and running with quickly. And also we want to keep more of a regular release cycle with potentially a roadmap of where we see things going. And the last one, which again is based on a lot of feedback that we keep hearing, is make it easier to see what Safe can do by having more excellent demonstration apps that are always available that we can reference from the website. Really to make it a simple story that if you want to use Safe, but you need to get buy-in from your colleagues or maybe your management, it might be easier to show them, here's some examples of some real Safe sites. It's not a risk in that regard. It's being used in real world scenarios. We can do it as well. Roman, if you want to stop for questions at all, just sort of interrupt me and we can take a break before I go any further. It's up to you.
We have some questions later.
Wait, I'll just keep blitzing through it then. So, good. So one of the things we've changed then for Safe 2 is this template, which I'm going to demonstrate in a little bit. So one of the things it's done is, as I said, we've completely simplified the template. It's going to be easier for us to develop and easier for people to actually understand what it does and what it doesn't do. And we've really looked at targeting what I would call 3 personas of people that use Safe. So one of them are the people that we see are curious about SafeStack. These might be .NET developers, maybe people from the C# community, maybe people that are outside of the .NET community, but they just want to try the SafeStack out, maybe spin up the template and see at a glance from a code level, what does it look like? The next persona we have are the experts, people that are using SafeStack today and don't want an opinionated story. They want something that gives them a bare bones, but then they can then add on step by step the bits that they need for their use cases. And then the last use case I would say is what we would call the first time production use. So these are people that want an opinionated story. They maybe don't know all the ways of using Webpack. They're not sure about the difference between Fable remoting and raw JavaScript messaging and so on and so forth. Those are people that want to get up and running quickly. They're not so fussed about fine tuning it. They would rather have a safe option, something that gives them a reasonable recommendation of how to get up and running. So given those 2 personas, what we've done is basically said the template is going to have 2 variations. One is what we call the minimal option and one is the full option. There will be nothing more. There will be no opportunities to switch between Saturn, Giraffe and Suave anymore. There will be no options to choose whether you want specific UI templates or anything like that. We'll just have these 2 options. The minimal one we see fitting with those first 2 personas, and then the full one we see fitting with the last persona, this first time production use. All the other things that we're missing out, we're going to replace with documentation and recipes. In the future, what we might look to do is to automate and provide a plugin model where people can essentially, through tooling, add in automatically different components. But for now, this is basically our starting point for Safe v2. So in terms of new features for Safe, in terms of out-of-the-box tooling and templating and guidance, one thing we've heard a lot of feedback in is testing support. So we're going to add into the template, and this will be on the V2 Go Live, will be out-of-the-box unit tests on the client and on the server. So you'll be able to test the browser side of things, you'll be able to test the client side, and you'll even be able to test the shared file. So you can test, here's some logic, does it do the same thing and correctly on both client and server? We're also looking at bringing in Feliz. If you're not sure what that is, that's essentially an alternative DSL over Fable React. So it's a way of writing essentially Elmish applications in a slightly different way to what's been popular up until now. And it's suddenly gaining a lot of traction. So we're considering maybe moving over to that. Another thing is UI design libraries. So we basically bundled Bulma and essentially the F# wraparound that, which is called Fulma, out of the box in Safe. We also want to add in other options. So we already have, I think, there's material design, which is available, but no one seems to, some people aren't even aware of that. And we're also looking at Ant design and Fluent UI potentially, and maybe even Tailwind. as a kind of alternative, so that not everyone has to use the same thing out of the box. And if you're not a CSS expert, this will give you some alternatives. We also want to bring more controls in out of the box so that people can use controls that are available on React without needing to write the wrappers themselves. So this might be things like more mapping controls, chart controls, data grids, just enough that there's more of a slightly richer set of libraries and tools that people can use to make compelling user interfaces. So as an example, that's just a screenshot from Ant Design, I think. So Zaid's been sort of steadily working on this in the background, but we're going to look to really help him get this done so that we get a decent set of the controls that are offered in Ant Design as quickly as possible. Another thing we've got here is now a checklist, and this is almost like a call to action for anyone that's using Safe today, or if they're interested in learning it. We have now set on GitHub on the Safe Docs repo a set of what we call recipes, and we're basically going to put a few samples out with a guidance of how to create and contribute to these, where essentially we want to rapidly create as many of these recipes as possible. So someone wants to know, how do I migrate to Packet from NuGet, or how do I use Yarn instead of NPM? We'll provide a set of simple steps, simple guidance with some code samples, potentially some repositories that people can work through from there. Okay, so quick demo, and then I think just a couple more slides, and then we'll turn over to Q&A. So the demos aren't going to be too ambitious. Really, all I want to show is what the Safe template is looking like in the future. So I'm going to show you both versions, how they look, and obviously if there's any questions, then we can go through this as well afterwards. But this is what you're going to see in the future if you create a brand new Safe template from scratch. And in fact, it might even be worthwhile, just in the background, if I open up another version of code and show you what the current template looks like today, so you can see how much we've removed. Let's see if I can find one. This might do it. Let's have a look. Yeah, this doesn't look too bad. So this was the current. This is an example of what the current Safe template looks like. Basically, when you just create it brand new, you get a yarn lock file, you get Webpack solution, release notes, a README, packet, package JSON, a build script, git ignore, editor config, dev containers, VS Code recommended extensions, all sorts of files. If you've never used SafeStack before, you're probably going to get lost in the sea of all of these files. And unfortunately, you often come away with the feeling that Safe is heavyweight and almost conflate a lot of these things. So things that we hear often is, oh, you can't run Safe without Packet, and you can't run Safe without git ignore or editor config files and so on. So we really wanted to remove the opportunity there for misunderstanding. So the new one is very, very simple. You essentially just get global JSON, which basically says you must be working with .NET Core 3.1, a solution file, a git ignore, which is pretty minimal, and then you're straight into the code. We're not even going to be using Packet for the minimal version. It will use NuGet out the box. So this will be a very, very simple option with a minimal amount of files. The server has been completely toned down. So this is all you're going to see when we create a new application. It gives you a simple endpoint, which returns the value 42. Absolute minimal efforts here. And on the client, again, it's pretty basic. There won't even be any themes. There will be no Fulma, no nothing like that. It's going to be pretty basic. Not too much more than that. And the opportunity here will be, if you're someone who's never used Safe before, there's not too much to confuse. And if you have used it before and you know what you're doing, you don't have to spend an hour removing a load of stuff that maybe you don't want. So the typical sort of dev process with this kind of template would actually be to start up and literally go into the server folder and do a .NET run, or maybe a .NET watch run to start the server. And then on the client side, go to source client and literally do an npm run start. So there will be no fake script, no nothing. There will be no. One of the things we're trying to remove is this notion of having magic behind the scenes. This will allow people, we think, to actually see behind, remove a lot of that magic and understand this is just .NET Watch Run, and this is just npm. There's no F# secret craziness that you need to learn before you can start using Safe. So that will compile the end. Another thing we've done is often people have struggled and to really move away from the dev cycle to the build cycle. I've got a CI/CD process. How do I actually get things working? So what we're going to do is make that even easier, that you can literally do something like .NET publish, and then go to the deploy folder. And then on the right-hand side here, do something like npm run build. And ideally, we'll get a folder that will be that will essentially have both things in one. And in fact, I'll show you on the full template, because that'll be out of the box, and I can show you some other cool stuff. But that's kind of one option. And then the other option I'll show you now quickly is the alternative one, which is a more fully featured version of this template that is geared towards someone who wants a few more batteries. They want to use something that we recommend as a starting point. And if you're not sure about how to get going, this will be sort of the place that you start. So we're going to be pushing Packet, which we still recommend as the best way to manage your dependencies in for the server and the client. We'll give you an editor config file, which will give you some more recommendations on things like indent size and spacing and so on and so forth. And what else do we have? On the client side, we'll give you some more theming. So we'll be using Fulma and so on and so forth. So it'll look a bit prettier. You'll have a few more dependencies like font awesome out of the box.
I think you need to come to
close. Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, fine. So essentially, yeah, we'll be just making this a bit nicer. We'll also have out of the box things like you'll be able to do a build from Fake, and it will package everything up. And we'll even have out of the box the ability to deploy to Azure in just a few lines of code. Basically, we're going to use a tech called Farmer, which will do all the deployment. None of the stuff you needed to do in the old version with creating Azure service principals will be required anymore. Things will just work out of the box. So I'll just wrap up now. I hope I've got time for just one or two more slides, and then we'll. So future plans, we want to continue to take advantage of .NET improvements so that we can make things even simpler in Safe. Doing a .NET Safe tool, which will give us some more modular, flexible opportunities to do things, and maybe even look at kind of starter kits or themes. So maybe a data science version of Safe, or an e-commerce version or something like that, which has a few more bundles and a bit more opinionated. Last thing, we're running a Safe Stack training course and F# training courses online. So on June 22nd this month, 4 afternoons, and Safe Stack next month, 4 afternoons. Compositional IT, eventbrite.com, or message me on Twitter afterwards. So, or in Slack, I'll be hanging around there as well if you've got any questions. So yeah, with that then, happy to hand over to Roman and any questions if we've got time.
Hi. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can hear myself. FSharpConf, but here, locally. We have time for a couple of questions. We have like 11 questions, so I'm going to pick out 2 randomly, and I'm going to sort of post them in a DM message in Slack for you, and then you can answer them there. Is that okay?
Absolutely, that's cool.
All right. On when Swagger UI will come to Giraffe?
That's a really good question. So I know that the Giraffe team and also Chris are looking into it on Saturn. Up until now, it wasn't really possible because Swagger was relying on essentially features that ASP.NET MVC provides. And Giraffe doesn't sit at the MVC level. It's a lower level down. But there's a new feature, a relatively new feature that was added to ASP.NET called endpoint routing, which came out in .NET Core 3, I believe. And that, I understand, is an enabler for that. And I think that Dustin is actually looking at this right now. So it could be something that is happening in the not too distant future. So watch this space is the answer.
All right, that's something to look forward to. And then perhaps a question many will have, like, if you want paid support as a business or as a developer, where should you go for safety?
So there are a couple of companies that offer commercial support that I'm aware of. One is ourselves, Compositional IT. So on the SafeDocs website, and I'll just quickly jump onto there. Let's see if I to my browser. Here we go. Right. So one other thing. So we've launched a new Safe landing page today, which makes things a bit simpler. But at the top, you'll see Get Support, which will take you to the SafeDocs support page. So there's Compositional IT ourselves. So we do coaching and training, as I've already mentioned, and support. And Lambda Factory, which is run by Chris Sislak as well. So there are at least 2 organizations that are offering it, plus I'm sure a number of independent consultants as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for coming and for giving the talk. It was very interesting to see where Safe is going. And we will just set everything up for the next speaker, and we will be right back.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.